Imagine waking up on a morning, about 3,000 years ago. No smell of coffee, no soft, freshly baked bread, and no fridge full of food. The first meal of the day is just a few simple items, just enough to keep you working from sunrise to sunset. For most people in the ancient world, eating was never a pleasure. It was simply the most important thing, to stay alive day by day. Interestingly, the lavish banquets we see in movies only reflect the lives of a tiny elite. The vast majority of ordinary people stuck to the exact same foods for years, even their entire lives. Though unbelievably simple, these very meals sustained the people who built the pyramids, plowed the vast fields, and laid the foundations for the world's first civilizations. In this video, we will follow the daily meals of an ordinary person in the ancient world, to discover what they actually ate every day, why they chose those foods, and what things familiar to us today were completely missing from their tables. If you lived in the ancient world, you would quickly realize that food was not a matter of choice. What decided your daily meal was simply what could be grown, caught, or gathered around where you lived. Harvests, weather, and nature directly dictated what was on the table. Just one bad harvest or a prolonged drought, and the entire community's rations would change instantly. For most people, life meant hard labor. They worked in the fields, tended livestock, quarried stone, built structures, or hauled goods from dawn to dusk. Because of this, food needed to provide steady energy, rather than an appealing flavor. Grains, beans, and vegetables became the foundation of every meal, because they were easy to grow, easy to store, and could feed many people over long periods. With that goal in mind, the daily menu of an ordinary person rarely changed. Once they found a stable food source, they would eat almost the exact same dishes, day after day. This simplicity was not a choice, it was the result of their living conditions and how ancient societies survived. And from that foundation, the first meal of the day also looked very different from what we are used to today. For most ancient people, breakfast was not a large meal. After waking up, they only ate just enough to start their day's work. In many places, it was a piece of grain bread, a bowl of thick porridge, or a bit of seasonal fruit if available. The most common drink was still water, while in some regions, people drank very low alcohol beer made from grain, as part of their daily ration. These foods were not elaborately prepared. They prioritized simplicity and made the most of available ingredients. Preparation was also quick, because most of the day was reserved for labor. A breakfast that took too much effort would be impossible to fit into that lifestyle. In many communities, breakfast only served to give the body enough strength for the first few hours of work. The amount of food depended entirely on what was left in the house, and the timing of the harvest season. This made the first meal of the day quite modest, a stark contrast to our modern idea of a full, varied breakfast. Because meals revolved around such simple ingredients, one particular food gradually became the foundation of almost every meal, across many ancient civilizations. Once humans learned to grow grain on a large scale, bread gradually became the most important food in many civilizations. From Egypt and Greece to Rome and parts of Western Asia, grain was ground into flour and made into various types of bread. For most ordinary people, this was the food that appeared in almost every single meal. This bread was very different from what we have today. The flour was ground by hand using stone mills, so it often mixed with tiny mineral particles from the grinding stone. The baking process didn't create the soft, fluffy loaves we are familiar with either. The final product was usually dense, hard, and had a quite coarse texture, but it kept for a long time and was filling enough for long days of labor. Archaeologists have found evidence showing that the teeth of many ancient Egyptians were significantly worn down. One of the main causes was those tiny mineral grains mixed in the bread flour over years of eating. This shows that bread was not just a daily food, it stayed with them throughout their entire lives. Bread was usually eaten with vegetables, beans, or a bit of vegetable oil if available. These simple ingredients formed the familiar meal of millions of people for centuries. Meanwhile, the protein-rich dishes that many today consider a staple appeared much less frequently in their lives. In many movies set in ancient times, the dining tables are often packed with massive slabs of meat brought out continuously. In reality, that image mostly reflects the lives of the wealthy and the ruling class. For the vast majority of people, meat was not a daily sight. Raising livestock required a lot of land, food, and effort. An animal was also valuable for many other things, like plowing fields, providing milk, or breeding. Therefore, people did not easily slaughter them just for a daily meal. Only during festivals, religious rituals, or special occasions would meat appear more frequently on the community's table. The familiar source of protein for ordinary people came from beans, fish in areas near rivers or coasts, and sometimes eggs. These foods were easier to get, cost less, and could meet the nutritional needs of the masses. Red meat, however, remained a valuable luxury, reserved for rare occasions. This difference creates a massive gap between the images we often see in fiction and the real life of ancient people. Their meals were much simpler, but because of that, they utilized almost every possible food source. This led to dishes that might surprise many of us today. When food supplies were always limited, waste was simply not an option. When they got an animal, ancient people did not just use the meat. Organs, bone marrow, fat, and many other parts were all turned into food. Every single part had nutritional value and helped stretch the food supply for the whole family or community. The same went for plants. Leaves, seeds, roots, and wild plants were all utilized if they were edible. Many regions also gathered wild seasonal vegetables to supplement their daily rations. This habit grew out of the need to maximize what nature provided, rather than just choosing the parts deemed the tastiest. In some civilizations, fermentation methods were also developed to preserve food longer. Fish, grains, and many other ingredients were processed this way to extend their shelf life and add flavor to otherwise bland meals. Though the taste might be very different from modern palates, it was an effective solution in a time before modern preservation existed. Because they had to rely entirely on what was available around them, the ancient table lacked many foods that we take for granted in our daily lives. If you look at a modern meal, many of the ingredients would be completely foreign to an ancient person. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, chili peppers, cocoa, and peanuts all originated in the Americas. For thousands of years, civilizations in Europe, Asia, and Africa had no idea these plants even existed. This also means that many famous dishes today used to look very different, or couldn't even exist yet. A loaf of bread without tomatoes, a stew without potatoes, or dishes without the spicy kick of chili peppers were completely normal. The ingredients we consider indispensable actually only became popular after maritime routes connected the Old World and the New World, in the late 15th century. This shift transformed human diets on a global scale. New crops were quickly brought to different lands, and gradually became a familiar part of the daily meal. Therefore, when imagining the ancient dining table, we need to separate it from the modern dishes we usually think of. Only then can we truly see how incredibly simple their lives really were. Even within the same civilization, not everyone ate the same. For working people, the daily meal still revolved around grains, beans, vegetables, and whatever was available in season. The ultimate goal was simply to secure enough food for the family, so variety was hardly a priority. Meanwhile, the wealthy class had access to a much wider range of foods. They could enjoy plenty of meat, fish, fruit, wine, and ingredients brought from other regions through trade. Food did not just satisfy hunger, it became a way to display status and wealth. That difference reveals an important truth. The lavish feasts often recorded in history only reflect the lives of a very small group. The majority of ancient humans still stuck to simple meals made from familiar ingredients around them. It was those ordinary meals that sustained generations and helped keep civilizations growing for thousands of years.